let's keep working on this image. I'm going to go ahead and collapse my info palette. So really focus in on my channels palette. Now, there are a couple of things that I need to do here. One is I need to finish off my curves adjustment layer. So I'm going to double click that icon, and I was noticing that I need to brighten the image up a little bit and increase contrast. So I'm going to do that and click OK. Now, one of the problems with this layer is that it's affecting the product as well, and I don't want that to be happening. So what I'm going to do is click in the mask that I created previously, and then Option click and drag that mask, or Alt click and drag. It's going to ask me, do I want to replace the layered mask? Yeah, I do. So now check this out. It's just affecting the background. How cool is that? I was able to use that mask that I created and copy it to a new layer with no time at all. A couple more things I need to do in this particular image. One of the things that I want to do is, looks like there's a little too much red in here. So I'm going to double click the icon for my curves adjustment layer, go to my red channel, and looks like I need to bring the red down a little bit. I'm going to do that. Click OK. Let's look at our before and after there. Okay, we're going in a good direction. Next thing I want to do is I want to work on this ice cube up here. So I'm going to press Q on the keyboard. That's going to allow me to enter Quick Mask, and then I'm going to paint, and you'll notice that I'm painting with red, and that's how Quick Mask works. I'm just trying to make a rough selection of this ice cube here. I'll press Q again. Now I have a pretty good selection of that area. I'm going to click on my adjustment layer icon and choose hue saturation, and drastically saturate this, and drastically shift the hue so I can see what I'm actually working on. I notice that I'm working on everything but the ice cube, so I need to invert my mask. You know the shortcut for that one, right? Control I, Command I, bam! There we go. Looks really nice. Now I can double click this, hold down the Option Alt key, changes the cancel button to reset. Very cool. Zoom in a little bit on image, and go to my cyans. What I'm going to do is pull some of that cyan out, go to the blues, increase some of the saturation of the blues there. That way it matches it with the rest of the ice cubes a little bit better. Let's look at our before and after. We'll do that by clicking OK, and then before and after. Yeah, subtle, yet significant. One of the things I'm noticing is that this ice cube could use that as well. So with my paintbrush, I'm going to paint with white over there, and I'm just going to be able to work on a few other ice cubes that have similar kind of a color shift, which I think would be nice to take them different directions. So I'm just going to travel around my image a little bit and pull out some of that color. Started off with one ice cube, applied it to the rest of them. Hey, that looks pretty cool. Let's look at our before and after. Zoom out so we can see how we're doing. Before and after. Nice. One of the things we may want to do here is just lower the opacity just a bit, just so it's not so strong. Keeps things a little bit subtle. Alright, a couple more things we want to do before we close out this movie, and that is work on the lemons. I'm going to do that by clicking on the adjustment icon and choosing selective color. Good old selective color. I'm going to go to the yellows. Here I'm going to pull out some of the cyan there. You can see there's a lot of it, so I'm just going to pull it down. Looks pretty nice. I'm also going to jump down to the whites. In the whites, I'm going to pull out some of the cyan, some of the magenta. Let's take a look at the blacks there. Pull those down. That looks pretty good. Click OK. Now let's check out our before and after. Nice. Just making those ice cubes snap and making the lemons look a little bit more appealing. Alright, well, we have more advanced color correction techniques to cover with this image, and we'll do that in the next movie. The next thing that I want to do is work on some color issues that I'm seeing in the image, in particular the blue underneath the ice and the yellow and lemons. So I'm going to click on my adjust layer icon and open up a hue saturation adjustment layer and navigate to the blues. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide the hue slider one way or the other just to make sure, okay, yeah, this is the area I'm working on. That is indeed the area I want to be on. And I'm just going to pull out some of the blue. I think this blue is a little bit over the top, so I'm going to take some of it out. Next, I'm going to go to the yellows. What I want to do here is make sure I'm working on the yellows. And in this case, I want to increase the saturation. I want those yellows to look even more tasty. Let's click OK and look at our before and after. One of the things I'm noticing is that I am affecting the yellows on the sardine can. So if I didn't want to affect those, what I would need to do is grab my brush and select black in my color picker, right bracket key to increase the brush size, and just make sure to paint away this area so that it's not being affected at all. So now it's just the blue as well as the lemons in the background. Subtle, yeah, that was a significant one. Next thing I want to do is work on the sardine can a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and create a curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to focus in on the sardine can. A little S curve here. And what I would like to do is apply this just to the sardine can. So I'm going to use a shortcut we learned before, which is to select a mask, Option Alt click and drag that mask, drop it on top of this adjustment layer, replace that layer mask. Now this is the opposite of what I want it to be. It's affecting everything but the sardine can. This time I want it to affect just the sardine can. Press Command or Control I. Wonderful. Now I'm just working on the sardine can. I can reopen that adjustment layer and just focus in on this. And what I want to do is make sure to not go too far away from the original color, but I want to add a little bit of brightness, a little bit of contrast here. And let's see my before and after. There we go. That looks pretty good. I need to just back that off just a little bit. There's one final step that I want to take here, and that is I want to work on the fork. So I'm going to grab the magic wand tool, and I'm going to work to select this fork. Just need a rough selection because I don't necessarily know if this edit is going to be worthwhile. That's a pretty rough selection there. That will do. Next step, go to my adjustment layer icon, hue saturation. I'm going to pull out any color that I'm seeing. I'm going to click OK. Let's look at our before and after. And one of the things I'm noticing, if I zoom in, is that I actually desaturated some of the background. That's not a good thing. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and the Shift key and click on the mask. That's going to show me this red ruby lift overlay of my mask. Then I can zoom in, and with a small brush, I'll be able to paint this away here so that I won't desaturate anything but the fork itself. Just some detail work, but this detail work will definitely be worth it. And sometimes when you're working on masks, you have to go to this red ruby with overlay because there's no other way to actually see what you're doing. Because if you're just looking at the mask or just the image, it's hard to tell where things start and stop. And for the most part, that looks pretty good. I'll hit the X key, clean up some of the fork itself. And it looks like I messed up there a little bit. Fix that right up. Fix up this edge over there. And just work on some of my edges. Double click the zoom tool and zoom out. Then I'm going to Shift Option click the mask or Shift Alt click the mask. Let's look at the before and after. Hey, that's nice. Just kind of cleans up that fork a little bit. Let's back off the intensity of that so it's not completely without color. And then zoom out and look at our image. Let's press the Tab key, F key, and then F7 to bring back the layers palette, and hold down your Option Alt key and click on the background layer or the original layer. Here's our before and after. Well done. Hey, that wraps up our conversation in regards to advanced color correction. In this initial movie, what we're going to do is talk about how to create a curves adjust layer that will actually simulate a chemical process of processing. Let's go ahead and open up the file curveguides.psd. Press F to go to full screen view mode, and I'm going to press Tab to get rid of everything else so I can just focus in on what we have here. Spacebar to position this on the left hand side of the screen, and F7 to open up my layers palette. Now, for starters, cross-processing is a chemical process. There are two types of cross-processing that we're going to attempt to simulate. One is C41 to E6. The other one is E6 to C41. And what we have here are screen grabs of curves adjustment layers that we'll be able to make that will simulate cross-processing. So if we want to create a curves adjustment layer, what we could do is open up the folder C41 to E6, click the adjustment layer icon, and select curves. And then go through our different channels and seek to simulate what we have over here. Go into the red channel and you get the gist of what we need to do. Of course, I've already created these curve adjustment layers for you, yet if you're interested in deconstructing them and seeing how they work, you could go ahead and create your own curves adjustment layers. I'm going to cancel out of this for now because I've already created these curves adjustment layers. I'm just showing you how this works so you can get a handle on cross-processing. The other option we have is E6 to C41, and there you can see my results for my different curves adjustments in order to simulate this type of cross-processing. Alright, well now that we have this brief introduction to cross-processing, and we know that what we're going to be doing is working with the curves adjustment layers, let's begin to work with these curves adjustment layers, and we'll do that in the next movie. I want to demo how we're going to use these cross-processing curves adjustment layers and apply them to a number of different images. Go ahead and open up the file, cross-processing PSD. I have to go to full screen view mode, and let's collapse our palette by double-clicking the word navigator, double-clicking the word color, so we can really focus in on the layers palette. I'm also going to right-click in the layers palette and choose large thumbnail, so I can actually see what I'm doing. Well, you'll notice that I have the curves adjustment layer for C41 to E6. If I double-click the icon and go through my different curves adjustments, you can see that I have these different curves adjustments that I showed you in the previous movie. And then in this folder, I have the E6 to C41 curves adjustment. How cool is that? Alright, so all that we need to do here is simply turn on one of these curves adjustment layers and see how the image looks. In this case, the image looks kind of interesting. I also can combine both of these for some really interesting results as well. One of the things you're going to see straight off the bat is that there is no one way to apply these cross-processing curves adjustment layers. Alright, I'm going to turn those off and then turn on my next layer. This is a photograph of my dad and my daughter Annika. I'm going to turn on these adjustment layers, and one of the things I see is, you know what, both of them don't look very good on this image. It's a black and white image, yet when I leave the top one on, E6 to C41, that looks kind of interesting, yet it just blew out all the detail. So what I need to do here is create a curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to then bring down my whites and bring down the overall tone of the image, my midtones, bring up the highlights maybe a little bit, depending on what type of effect I'm interested in achieving. I'm just playing around here a little bit. Let's click OK. There's then our before and after. Hey, that looks pretty good. I can also select this folder, and I can diminish the intensity of the effect by lowering the opacity. And then, of course, I can do the same thing here if I want to add some more brightness to it. And I have a very different color effect. Well, let's take the opacity all the way back up here. Take the opacity on this one all the way back up, and let's take a look at this with one more image. The last image that I want to look at is drop-in. In this case, just want to highlight that C41 to E6 looked good on this. C41 to E6 will look good on certain images, and then E6 to C41 is going to look a lot better on other images. So it really depends on the image, the tonality, the brightness of the image, etc., etc. But as you can see, we can accomplish some pretty interesting results. Let's hit Tab and then F to go to full screen mode. That's a really fascinating image with that cross-processing effect. Let's look at our before and after. That cross-processing really does add something to the image.
In this movie, we'll be working on a few different images: cross-processing.psd, jcambeauty.psd, and sohobw.psd. Go ahead and select all those images in Adobe Bridge by Command or Control clicking. Next, right-click and choose Open. Yet another way to open files from the Adobe Bridge. Go ahead and navigate to the Window drop-down menu, Arrange, and choose Tile horizontally. This will give us access to view all of these images at once. Now, here we have the cross-processing file with those cross-processing adjustment layers. All that you're going to need to do to apply those to your images is simply drag and drop. Make sure, though, you bring both of them with you, because with this particular image, that looks pretty cool, but let's see what happens when I bring both of them in. First, I have to go to full screen view mode so I can see what's happening. Alright, you know what? That other one actually brings a little bit of life to the image that wouldn't have been there had I just had one of those adjustment layers. I have to toggle out of the full screen view mode. Again, that's going to be clicking in this file, simply dragging and dropping those curves adjustment layers, and then looking at what happens when you combine them. One of the things that you're going to want to pay attention to is the stacking order. You'll notice that the stacking order affects the images. So in this case, take a look at how this image looks in this current context, and then I'm going to place C41 on top. Looks very different, doesn't it? So you'll find that certain images will tend to like certain stacking orders, and some images will like both adjustment layers. Other images, you'll just want to have one of the two adjustment layers. One of the things that happens a lot of times when you use these cross-processing adjustments is that it blows out detail. Now that can be a good thing, but let's say you want some of that detail back. What you can do is simply copy a layer. In this case, we're going to copy this background layer to a new layer and take our blend mode to multiply. What that's going to do is just bring down a lot of the detail. So I have a lot of the detail back. Another thing I can do, of course, would be to go to the adjustment layer icon, select curves, and then bring down the detail by making a curves adjustment layer and clicking OK. So a couple of different options there, or perhaps both. And one of the things you're going to find as you do this is that as you work with color and tone, you're going to come up with some really interesting results simply by playing and experimenting with these curves adjustment layers. As a quick side note, I want to give a quick shout out thanks to Jenny Kim, who's a fashion photographer in New York, for providing us with this image. Alright, well that wraps up this movie. I'll catch you in the next one.